Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. He said those words while nails were being driven through his hands. He said them while the crowd that had welcomed him with palm branches days earlier now screamed for his execution. He said them while soldiers divided his clothing beneath him as if he were already gone. And in that moment, the most extreme moment of betrayal any human being has ever faced, Jesus revealed something so radical, so completely opposite to everything the world teaches about how to respond to those who wound you, that most people hear it and feel it is simply beyond them. A beautiful ideal, perhaps, but not something an ordinary person carrying ordinary pain could actually do. And today, you who are listening to these words, know this. There is a way that Jesus calls you to walk when you have been betrayed. Not because it is easy, not because the person who hurt you deserves it, but because of what this path does to you, to your soul, to your freedom, to the depth of strength that can grow inside a person who has learned to respond to betrayal the way Jesus responded to his. If you understand what Jesus is truly asking of you in these moments and why he is asking it, nothing that has been done to you will be able to hold you in its grip forever. This is not a human philosophy. It is a kingdom key, a truth that few have fully grasped, but which, when it takes root in the soul, produces a freedom that nothing and no one can take from you again. Stay with this message until the very end, because there is a question waiting for you there. A question that may be the most important one you ask yourself this year. And between now and then, we are going to go somewhere together that most people never go when they think about betrayal. We are going to go past the pain and past the anger, and past the long sleepless nights of replaying what happened. And we are going to find something on the other side that Jesus has been waiting to give you since the very moment the wound was made. Write this phrase in the comments right now before we go any further. Write, I choose the path of the free. Not because you feel free yet, but because you are declaring, before this message is over, that you are ready to walk toward it. What betrayal actually does to a soul. Before we can understand what Jesus asks of us in response to betrayal, we need to be honest about what betrayal actually does, not the polite, sanitized version, the real one. Betrayal is not the same as being hurt by a stranger. When a stranger wrongs you, it stings, but there is a limit to how deep it reaches. Betrayal comes from somewhere else. It comes from the places where you lowered your guard, from the person whose voice you trusted, from the friend who knew your secrets, the partner who held your vulnerabilities, the family member who was supposed to be safe. Betrayal works its damage so deeply because it enters through open doors, through trust, through love, through the parts of you that dared to believe that another person was genuinely for you. And what it leaves behind is not simply pain. Betrayal leaves behind a particular kind of spiritual wreckage that, if it is not addressed at the right level, will quietly reconstruct your entire inner world around its wound. You will begin to close doors that used to be open. You will begin to interpret every new relationship through the lens of what the old one did to you. You will begin to build walls that feel like wisdom, but are actually prisons. The person who betrayed you may have moved on entirely, living their life without a second thought for what they did to yours. And yet, in your inner world, they are still in the room. Their words are still the loudest ones. Their actions are still writing the story you tell yourself about whether people can be trusted, whether you are worth protecting, whether love is ever actually safe. This is what the enemy of your soul wants betrayal to produce in you. Not just pain, which eventually fades, but a permanent restructuring of your inner life around distrust, around bitterness, around the closed posture of someone who has decided that opening up again is simply too dangerous. And the terrifying thing is that this restructuring happens slowly, quietly, and often without the person even realizing it is happening. You simply become someone who no longer reaches out the way you used to. Someone who holds something back in every relationship. Someone who, even in moments of genuine connection, is listening for the sound of a door closing. Jesus knew this. He knew it not as a theological abstraction, but as someone who was personally betrayed by one of his closest companions after 3 years of shared life, shared meals, shared prayer, shared ministry. Judas did not betray a stranger. He betrayed a friend. He identified Jesus to his killers with a kiss. The most intimate gesture of greeting in that culture turned into the signal for an arrest. The intimacy of the betrayal was the point, and Jesus knew it was coming. He said at the Last Supper that one of those eating with him would betray him, and John records that when he said it, he was troubled in spirit. He was not unmoved. He was not performing detachment. He felt the weight of it, the way any human being feels the weight of being handed over by someone they loved. And yet what he chose to do with that weight, both in the garden and on the cross, and in every teaching he gave about how to respond to those who wound you, is the most radical answer the world has ever been given to the question of what to do with betrayal. The 7 truths Jesus reveals about responding to betrayal. The first truth you must understand is that the command to forgive was never about the person who hurt you. It was always about the person you are becoming. In Matthew 5:44, Jesus says something that appears, on the surface, to be simply a moral instruction. He says, "Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who mistreat and persecute you." The world reads this and immediately reacts from a sense of fairness. Why should someone who hurt me receive love? Why should someone who cursed me receive blessing? They do not deserve it. And that reaction is understandable. It is human. It is honest. But here is what Jesus was actually saying underneath the instruction, something that gets lost when we read this only as a command about how to treat other people. He was describing a spiritual law. The law is this: what you hold in your heart toward another person, whether love or hatred, blessing or curse, is not imprisoned inside them. It is imprisoned inside you. As long as bitterness lives in you toward the person who hurt you, you are carrying them. You are giving them rent-free residence in the most private place you have, your inner life. You are allowing the wound they made to continue making new wounds every time you revisit it. Jesus was not telling you to forgive because the other person deserves it. He was telling you to forgive because you deserve freedom, because the chains that unforgiveness wraps around the one who was wronged are heavier than any the wrongdoer wears. To forgive is not to hand your betrayer a gift. It is to lay down a weight that was destroying you, not them. It is to say, I refuse to let what you did to me in one moment define the entire architecture of my inner life going forward. That is not naivety. That is not weakness. That is the most sophisticated form of self-preservation that exists. The kind Jesus modeled from the cross, when he refused to let even crucifixion produce bitterness in his soul. The second truth you must understand is that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing, and Jesus never confused them. This is perhaps the most important distinction in this entire message, and it is one that has caused immeasurable damage when it has been left unmade in Christian teaching about forgiveness. Jesus commands forgiveness. He does not command the restoration of every relationship to the condition it was in before the wound. He forgave from the cross, and those who crucified him were not then handed positions of trust and intimacy in his inner circle. Forgiveness releases a person from your heart's verdict. It does not require you to place yourself back inside a situation that has proven to be unsafe. Consider David and Saul. David, whose Psalms form the most intimate record of interior spiritual life in all of Scripture, spent years fleeing from a man who had repeatedly tried to kill him. He forgave Saul. He refused to harm him when he had the opportunity to do so. He wept for him when he died. And yet David did not return to Saul's court, did not place himself under Saul's authority again, did not pretend that the threat was not real because he had chosen forgiveness. He maintained both things at the same time: genuine forgiveness in his heart and genuine wisdom about where he could safely be. Jesus never asked anyone to be foolish with their trust. He asked them to be free from bitterness. Those are completely different invitations. You can forgive the person who betrayed you, while also recognizing that the relationship cannot be what it was. You can release them from your heart's condemnation, while also establishing appropriate distance. The confusion between these two things has caused many people to either remain in genuinely harmful situations in the name of forgiveness, or to refuse to forgive at all because they mistakenly believe it means restoring something that should not be restored. Jesus' invitation is more precise than either of those. It is to carry no one as a prisoner in your heart, while also walking with the wisdom of someone who has learned from what happened. The third truth you must understand is that blessing those who have hurt you is not a feeling. It is a choice that produces a feeling. When Jesus says to bless those who curse you, he is not asking you to manufacture a warm emotion towards someone who has done you real harm. He is asking you to make a specific choice, to speak words of well-being over someone in prayer, to actively desire that God's goodness reach them, to refuse to allow your mouth and your inner world to become a place where curses against them live. And this choice, made in the will before it is felt in the emotions, has a remarkable effect on the person making it. There is something in the human soul that cannot sustain bitterness and blessing simultaneously. They are mutually exclusive inner postures. When you choose to bless someone who hurt you, sincerely, in prayer, before God, you are essentially reorganizing which posture your inner world is oriented around. You are not saying what they did was acceptable. You are saying that your soul is not going to be shaped by their wrongdoing. You are refusing to let the place inside you where their offense lives become a permanent feature of your interior landscape. The Apostle Paul picks this up in Romans 12:14 when he writes, "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse." This is not a suggestion for the advanced believer. It is a fundamental description of what it looks like to walk in the freedom Christ purchased. And it becomes possible not when you feel it first, but when you choose it first and allow the feeling to follow. Sometimes slowly, sometimes only after many repetitions of the choice, but always eventually. The fourth truth you must understand is that prayer for those who have betrayed you is one of the most powerful transformative tools God has given you. For you. Jesus says in Matthew 5:44, "Pray for those who mistreat you and persecute you." And again, most people read this as an instruction about the other person, as if the prayer is primarily for their benefit. It is not. Or rather, it is not only. Prayer for the person who betrayed you changes you. It is almost impossible to maintain genuine, sustained, sincere intercessory prayer for another person and simultaneously sustain the kind of hardened hatred toward them that bitterness requires. The two cannot coexist in the same soul at the same time. This does not mean the prayer is comfortable. The first time you pray for someone who has genuinely wounded you, it may feel false, forced, almost impossible. You may sit before God with their name in your mouth and feel nothing but the memory of what they did. That is exactly where you begin. You do not wait until you feel generous toward them to pray. You pray first, and you ask God to work in them, genuinely, specifically, and you watch what happens to your own heart in the process. Something begins to loosen, not immediately, not all at once, but something in the locked structure of the wound begins to give way when prayer enters it. Jesus demonstrated this from the cross. In the most extreme moment of being wronged that any human being has experienced, he prayed. He did not curse. He did not pronounce judgment. He interceded, "Father, forgive them." And in doing so, he showed that intercessory prayer for those who wound us is not the action of the defeated. It is the action of the most inwardly free. The fifth truth you must understand is that your identity must be rooted somewhere the betrayal cannot reach. This may be the deepest layer of everything Jesus teaches about responding to betrayal. Because ultimately, why does betrayal wound so deeply? Why does it do more than simply hurt? Why does it destabilize, disorient, sometimes shatter entire interior structures that had seemed solid, because we had allowed our sense of who we are to be partly determined by the relationship that was broken. When someone who held our trust turns against us, it is not only the relationship that is lost. It is the version of ourselves that existed in and through that relationship. Their betrayal does not just injure us. It tells us a story about who we are, and some part of us, in the rawness of the wound, begins to believe it. Jesus in the wilderness was tempted along exactly this axis. The enemy's first words to him were not an accusation, but a question designed to destabilize identity. If you are the Son of God. What the enemy was actually saying was, are you sure about who you are? And Jesus' response, he did not argue, did not defend, did not reach for external proof of his identity. He simply returned to the word. It is written. He had a source for his identity that no external circumstance or external voice could overwrite. You will not be able to respond to betrayal the way Jesus calls you to respond unless you have or are building the same thing. A source of identity that the betrayal cannot reach. A foundation of who you are that does not depend on whether any human being affirms, chooses, honors, or stays. If you know who you are in the Father, loved, called, seen, specific, valued independently of any human verdict, then what another person does to you, however much it hurts, cannot write the final word about your worth. And when it cannot write the final word, the forgiveness and the blessing Jesus asks for becomes something you can actually give, because you are not giving from an emptied account. You are giving from a source that the wound did not touch. The sixth truth you must understand is that the story of Joseph is not a story about triumph. It is a story about what happens when a person refuses to let betrayal determine their character. Joseph was 17 years old when his own brothers, jealous of the obvious favoritism their father showed him, threw him into a pit and sold him to slave traders passing through on their way to Egypt. He did not ask for what happened to him. He had done nothing to deserve being stripped of his identity, his freedom, his family, and his future in a single afternoon by people who should have been his protectors. And yet the remarkable thing about Joseph's story is not the eventual reversal of fortune. The dreams interpreted, the elevation to governor, the dramatic reunion years later. The remarkable thing is the interior person who arrives at that reversal. Because when Joseph finally stands before his brothers, now in a position of total power over the men who destroyed his early life, what comes out of him is not vengeance. It is not even restrained mercy. What comes out of him are some of the most extraordinary words in the entire Old Testament. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. This is not something a person says who spent the years of their captivity rehearsing the injury and feeding the bitterness. This is something said by a person who had, somewhere in those years, in the Egyptian jail, in the long silences where no one came to rescue him, made a choice about who he was going to be in relation to what had been done to him. He had refused to allow the story of his brother's betrayal to become the story of his life. And the result of that refusal was that when God placed him in a position to rewrite the ending, he did not write it in blood, he wrote it in grace. This is what Jesus is pointing you toward when he teaches about responding to those who hurt you. Not the suppression of pain, not the performance of forgiveness you do not feel, but the long, faithful daily practice of refusing to let the wound define you until the day comes when you discover that it did not. The seventh truth you must understand is that the cross is not simply an example of forgiveness. It is the source that makes forgiveness in you possible. This is where everything comes together, and it is the truth that elevates Christian forgiveness entirely beyond a moral achievement or a psychological technique. Jesus did not simply demonstrate forgiveness from the cross as a model for you to imitate through your own effort. He secured, through what he did there, something that makes genuine forgiveness available to ordinary people carrying ordinary wounds. When Paul writes in Colossians 3:13, "Forgive as the Lord forgave you," he is not setting a standard that humanity, on its own, could ever meet. He is pointing to a source. The forgiveness you are called to extend to those who have wounded you flows from a forgiveness you have already received. You are not generating something from within your own depleted reserves. You are passing on something that was given to you at a cost you could never have paid yourself. The same grace that covered everything you have ever done that was wrong, every time you were the one who betrayed, every moment when you were the Judas and not the Christ. That same grace is the well from which you draw when Jesus asks you to extend it towards someone else. This does not make it effortless. It does not make it instant, but it makes it possible because you are not reaching for something you do not have. You are reaching for something that has already been placed inside you by the Spirit of the one who said, while being killed by the people he came to save, Father, forgive them. 5 hidden mysteries about betrayal that Scripture reveals to those who go deeper. You have heard the 7 visible truths, but there are things that God reveals only to those who press further, deeper into the silence of the Word, deeper into the places where the Scripture says what most casual reading never reaches. First hidden mystery: the person who betrayed you may have been the unlikely instrument of your breakthrough. This is perhaps the hardest of all the hidden mysteries to receive, and it needs to be said carefully. It is not a claim that what they did was good, or that God authored the wrong done to you. It is a claim about what God is capable of doing with the wrong done to you, despite the wrongdoer's intentions and despite your current pain. Joseph's brothers intended to destroy him. Judas intended to hand Jesus over to death. And in both cases, what was meant as an ending became an opening for something that could not have been reached any other way. Joseph could not have saved Egypt and his family from famine if he had not been sold into slavery in Egypt first. The salvation Jesus purchased could not have been accomplished without the cross, and the cross required a betrayer to set it in motion. This does not glorify Judas. It reveals the extraordinary capacity of God to work in the ruins that human cruelty produces. When you look back on what was done to you, not yet perhaps, but one day, you may find that the door that was closed by betrayal was actually the door to the room where the most important thing in your life was waiting. Not because suffering is good, but because the God who redeems is. Second hidden mystery. There are 2 kinds of people who emerge from betrayal, and the difference between them is a single interior choice. The first kind emerges closed. They build with the wound. Every new wall they put up, every relationship they keep at a certain distance, every vulnerability they learn to hide. All of it is constructed from the material the betrayal left behind. They become, in a slow and often invisible way, architects of their own isolation. And from the outside, it often looks like wisdom. It often even feels like wisdom, but it is actually a prison built by someone else's sin, which the wounded person then chose to inhabit permanently. The second kind emerges open, not naive, not without appropriate caution, but fundamentally still reachable, still capable of trust, still available to love and be loved. This kind of person does not emerge open easily. They emerge open through 1,000 small choices, many of them made in the dark, many of them made when everything inside them said to close. They are the ones who have discovered the single most important thing about walking through betrayal: that your response to it is actually a choice about what kind of person you will be for the rest of your life. And they chose not to let someone else's wrong define the answer to that question. Jesus makes this choice available to you, not as a one-time dramatic decision, but as a daily practice of opening what wants to close, of choosing the path of the free rather than the path of the defended. It is the narrow path he describes. It is also the one that leads somewhere worth going. Third hidden mystery: what you do not forgive, you carry, and what you carry long enough begins to reshape you. There is a process that happens in the human soul when unforgiveness is allowed to remain. It is gradual, almost imperceptible, but it is certain. The wound that began as something done to you slowly becomes something you do to yourself. You revisit it, you refuel it, You maintain it with the daily labor of replaying and rehearsing and keeping the case against the person who wronged you active and current. And every hour you invest in that maintenance is an hour that could have been invested in building something new. Jesus knew this. This is why he was so insistent, across so many different teachings, about the releasing of debts, the forgiving of offenses, the choosing of love over resentment. He was not being idealistic. He was being deeply practical about what happens to a human soul that chooses to carry what it was never designed to carry. You were not made to be a vessel for sustained bitterness. Your soul does not have the architecture for it. And when you force it to hold what it was not built to hold, something in its structure eventually gives way. In your health, in your relationships, in your capacity for joy, in your ability to trust God's goodness when it is offered to you. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is maintenance. It is the practice of keeping your inner house in the condition it was designed for. Fourth hidden mystery. The comparison between Peter and Judas reveals the single difference between restoration and destruction after betrayal of someone you love. Both men betrayed Jesus. Judas handed him over to be killed. Peter denied 3 times with curses that he even knew him on the night Jesus needed him most. By any external measure, what Peter did was a profound betrayal. And yet the 2 stories end completely differently. Judas in death, Peter restored to lead the early church, his name written on one of the 12 foundations of the heavenly Jerusalem. What was the difference? It was not the severity of the sin. It was what each man did next. Judas looked at what he had done and concluded that it was unredeemable. He did not return to Jesus. He went to the people who had no power to forgive him and tried to undo the transaction he had made. And when he could not, he destroyed himself. Peter wept. He went back to his boat, to what he knew, to the ordinary life he had left 3 years earlier. And Jesus came and found him there, at the edge of the sea in the early morning, and restored him with the same intimacy that the betrayal had broken. 3 questions, 1 for each denial. Do you love me? This hidden mystery is specifically for those who have been on both sides of betrayal. For those who have been betrayed, the story of Judas and Peter reveals that the person who hurt you may not be beyond what God can do with a broken and returning soul. For those who have done the betraying, and most of us have, in one form or another, in relationships of smaller or greater consequence, Peter's story is the way home. It is always the way home. You go back. You do not wait until you have something to offer. You go back, and you let the question be asked. 5th hidden mystery. The person you forgive is almost never the last person you will need to forgive. Forgiveness is not an event. It is a discipline of the soul that must be practiced until it becomes who you are. Jesus makes a point of this in Matthew 18, when Peter, surely feeling generous, asks if he should forgive someone who has wronged him as many as 7 times. 7 was already, in that culture, a number associated with completeness, with going beyond the reasonable limit. And Jesus answers, not 7 times, but 70 times 7, 490 times. He is not giving Peter a number to count toward. He is dismantling the idea of a limit altogether. He is saying, the practice of forgiveness is not something you do once and then return to your default settings. It is the default setting itself. It is the orientation of a soul that has understood what grace costs, what grace received obligates, and what carrying hatred costs the one who carries it. 7 spiritual transformations that happen in the soul that chooses to forgive. The moment you begin to walk in the direction of genuine, Jesus-rooted forgiveness of those who have betrayed you, things begin to shift inside you. Not all at once, not without difficulty, but steadily, one layer at a time, a freedom begins to be rebuilt in the place where the wound was. The first transformation is the return of peace. Not the shallow peace of pretending nothing happened, but the deeper peace that Paul describes, the one that passes understanding, the one that guards your heart and mind. This peace is not dependent on the resolution of your circumstances.
It is the peace of a soul that is no longer at war with its own past.
The second transformation is the gradual restoration of your capacity to trust. Not naive trust that assumes everyone is safe, but the mature trust of someone who has learned that being wounded did not end them, and that the God who is faithful was present even in the betrayal and will be present in whatever comes next. The third transformation is the quieting of the inner voice that rehearses the wound. The moment you stop actively maintaining the bitterness, it begins to lose its loudness. It does not vanish immediately, but it no longer commands the room the way it did. Other voices, quieter ones, the voice of God, the voice of genuine connection, the voice of your own renewed sense of purpose, begin to be audible again. The fourth transformation is compassion. Not for the act, never for the act, but for the person. When you genuinely pray for someone who hurt you, over time, something opens in you toward them that is not agreement with what they did, and is not the vulnerability of the relationship before the wound. It is something cleaner than both, a recognition that they are a person whose story you do not fully know, carrying wounds of their own that may explain, without excusing, what they did to yours. The fifth transformation is the recovery of your creativity and your calling. Bitterness is a consuming energy. It takes from you in ways you do not realize until it is gone. The lightness of imagination, the reaching toward new things, the willingness to risk again. When it lifts, these things come back. Not in a dramatic rush, but in a slow, quiet return, like light returning to a room where the curtains have been gradually drawn back. The sixth transformation is a new authority in your prayer. Those who have walked through genuine forgiveness of genuine betrayal pray with a weight and a compassion that those who have not cannot yet access. Their intercession has been tested in the fire of their own experience, and it comes out refined. When they pray for others who are wounded, something moves, because they know from the inside what they are praying about. The seventh transformation is the discovery that what was done to you did not have the final word about your story. That is the transformation that all the others were building toward. The moment you realized that the betrayal was not the end, was not the defining chapter, was perhaps not even the most significant thing that happened to you. Only one of the more painful steps on a journey that God was present in the entire time and is continuing to shape towards something you have not yet fully seen. The parable of two wells. Let me tell you a story. It is the story of two people who were hurt in the same way, by the same kind of wound, in the same season of their lives. And what makes it worth telling is not what was done to them. It is what each of them did next. The first person, when the betrayal came, did what seemed completely natural. They built a wall. Quietly, methodically, stone by stone, they enclosed the wound inside something that felt like protection. They stopped reaching out the way they used to. They chose, in the aftermath, to keep everyone at a certain distance, close enough to not be alone, far enough to never again be that exposed. And from the outside, for a long time, this looked like recovery. They functioned. They went on with their life. They even seemed, to most people who knew them, to have moved on. But underneath the wall, in the place where the wound had been, something was happening. The wound, sealed off from air and light and the presence of other people, was becoming something it was not originally. It was becoming a well, not a well of water, but a well of bitterness. And every time a new situation arose that reminded them of what had been done to them, they drew from that well. They drew from it in the way they read the motives of new friends. They drew from it in the way they refused to be fully present in new relationships. They drew from it in the quiet, corrosive way they talked to themselves in private about whether they were worth loving, whether any of it would ever be safe. And over the years, without ever choosing it consciously, they became shaped by what they were drawing from. The bitterness had become, quietly, their source. The second person was given exactly the same wound. The pain was just as real, the shock just as total, the loss just as genuine. And they did not skip past any of it. They wept, they were angry. They sat in the darkness of it for longer than was comfortable. But in that darkness, They made a choice. Not a dramatic choice, not one that anyone saw or applauded. They chose to bring the wound to God rather than seal it inside themselves. They brought it raw and unresolved and still bleeding, and they placed it in the only hands that actually know what to do with it. And they came back the next day and placed it there again, and the day after that. It was not a fast process. It was not a tidy one. There were days when the anger returned as strong as the first week. There were nights when forgiving felt like the most impossible thing they had ever been asked to do. But they kept coming back. And slowly, in the place where the wound was, something different began to form. Not a wall, not a well of bitterness, a spring. The kind that rises from somewhere deeper than the wound ever reached. The kind that, once it begins to flow, does not require the person to be having a particularly good day in order to keep flowing. It flows because it has found its source in something that does not dry up. And one day, not the day they expected, not the way they imagined, someone came to them with the same kind of wound they had carried. And from that spring, they had something to offer. Not advice, not a formula, something rarer than both. The presence of someone who had been in the same dark room and had found, by a path that cost them everything, the door. Jesus asked you to love your enemies, not to make your life harder. He asked you to because he knew that the spring, not the well, was where you were always meant to draw from. And he knew that the path from the well to the spring runs directly through the choice to forgive. A closing declaration and the question that was promised. Before we pray, let me speak plainly to whatever you are carrying as you have listened to this message. The person who betrayed you was wrong. What was done to you was not acceptable, was not fair, was not what you deserved. And none of what has been said in this message erases or diminishes that. The path Jesus calls you to walk does not require you to pretend otherwise, but he is asking you something. Right now, in the quiet of wherever you are listening to these words, he is asking, will you let the wound have the final word about who you are? Will you let what they did to you determine what you do to yourself for the rest of your life? Will you build your interior world from the material of what you lost, or from the material of what cannot be lost? The love of a father whose knowledge of you is not shaken by what another person did to you. The authority of a spirit who can make springs in deserts. The grace of a Savior who forgave from a cross and then rose from a tomb and then came back to find his betrayers and restore them. That is the question that was promised at the beginning. It is not a question about the person who hurt you. It is a question about you, about what you do next. You are not required to answer it today, but it will keep waiting. Because Jesus is very patient with the people he loves. He waited by a sea in the early morning for a fisherman who had denied him 3 times. He will wait for you. Prayer. Lord my God, you who know every wound that lives in me, every name I carry in the place where pain lives, every night I have spent with the weight of what was done to me, come into this place right now. I do not come to you with the pretense that this is easy. I come to you honest, that there are people whose names even now land in my heart like stones, that there are moments I have replayed so many times I know every detail, that there are places in me that closed the day the betrayal happened and have not fully opened since. But I come to you because of Luke 23:34, because of what you said from the cross, in the moment when you had every right to say something entirely different. Father, forgive them. And if you could say that then, in that moment, then I believe you can do something in me now that I cannot do in myself. I ask you to begin the work. Not the performance of forgiveness for the sake of appearances, the real work. The interior work that only you can reach. Go into the places where bitterness has settled and begin to move it. Go into the places where the wound became a wall and begin to breathe through it. Go into the places where I have allowed what was done to me to write a story about who I am and replace it with what you have said about me. Loved, chosen, seen, called, carried, not abandoned. I speak the name of those who have hurt me before you, not to ask you to judge them, but to release them from the position of power they have held inside me. I hand them to you. I am no longer their warden, and they are no longer my prison. What was done to me I place at your feet, and I ask you to do with it what only you can do. The thing you did with the cross, the thing you did with Joseph's pit, the thing you do in every ruin that is surrendered to you, which is to make from it something that could not have been made any other way. Build in me the spring, not the well. Make me someone who draws from a source the betrayal could not touch. Shape me, in the long faithfulness of this journey, into someone whose freedom is visible to those who are still in the prison I am leaving behind. And let the question you asked Peter, "Do you love me?" be my returning point whenever I find myself drifting back into the old posture. Because the answer, even on the hardest days, even when the anger returns and the pain resurfaces, is still yes. It is still yes. In the name of the one who forgave from the cross, who rose on the third day, who came back to find the ones who had failed him and offered them not judgment, but commission. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. If this message reached something in you that has needed reaching for a long time, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who is still in the middle of the wound, someone who has not yet found the door that leads from the well to the spring. You may not know how much they need to hear that the path Jesus offers is not the path of the naively forgiving. It is the path of the genuinely free. And write in the comments, "I choose the path of the free." Let that be your declaration today, not because you have arrived, but because you have decided where you are walking.